My name is Clara Dawson. If you've ever been humiliated by the people who were supposed to be your family, then you'll understand my pain. I thought I married into love, but instead, I married into judgment. 3 years ago, I joined the Dawson family, the so-called perfect family. Everyone admired them. I admired them too, until I realized perfection can be poison. "Clara, dear," my mother-in-law said at the first family dinner, "you don't really talk much, do you? We're a lively bunch here." I smiled. I'm still getting used to everyone. She laughed softly. "Of course you are. Simple girls take time." Everyone chuckled. Even Daniel, my husband, smiled awkwardly. And that was the moment I realized I didn't belong. At Daniel's cousin's engagement party, Margaret looked at me and said, "Oh, Clara, that dress is adorable. Did you borrow it? So humble." Laughter, cameras flashing, and me standing there pretending not to bleed inside. Later that night, in the bathroom stall, I cried silently. I promised myself, next time I'd be stronger. But I wasn't ready for what came next. Daniel's company dinner, hundreds of people, champagne glasses clinking, proud faces everywhere. His father raised a toast. "To my son Daniel, the pride of the Dawson family. He's always made the right choices. Well, almost all of them." The audience laughed. Someone whispered, "She's the wrong choice." And they laughed again. I froze. My hands trembled, my throat burned. But I didn't cry there, not in front of them. I waited. I smiled politely. Then I walked out of that hall, and I didn't look back. When I reached home, I stared at my reflection, messy hair, tear-stained cheeks, and I whispered to myself, "Clara, they think they broke you, but this is the day you start to rise." Because from that night on, I wasn't the same woman anymore. They wanted a joke, but I was about to become a storm. If you've ever been humiliated by people who thought they were better than you, listen closely. They might have the stage today, but your spotlight is coming. Stay with me, because next time I'll tell you exactly how I turned their shame into my strength. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe, because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes, but a fire I'd never felt before. I looked around my small apartment and said to myself, "Clara, you've spent enough time crying, now you work." I didn't know where to start. I had no rich parents, no fancy degree, no powerful name. All I had was me. I walked into the kitchen and found Daniel sitting there, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up. "Daniel," I said softly, "why didn't you stop them last night?" He sighed. "Clara, they were just joking. You take things too seriously." I froze. Joking? They humiliated me in front of everyone. He shrugged. "You just need to lighten up. That's how my family is." And in that moment, I knew I was on my own. I spent the next few days thinking, who was I before them? A girl with dreams, a girl who loved to write, a girl who once believed she could do anything. So I started writing again. Every night after Daniel slept, I'd sit by the window with my old laptop and type. Stories, thoughts, pain, everything I had locked inside for years. Weeks passed. Then, one morning, I received an email. A digital magazine wanted to publish my short story, and they were willing to pay me for it. I couldn't believe it. I screamed, I laughed, I cried. It wasn't much, just a few $100s, but it was mine. That night, I told Daniel. He barely looked up from his phone. "Good for you," he muttered. No hug, no smile, nothing. I whispered, "One day, Daniel, you'll wish you'd looked at me differently." Months passed, and my writing started getting noticed. People online began sharing my stories. I started gaining followers, readers who called me the woman who writes from the soul. And slowly, the same girl who was laughed at started to rise. One day, I got invited to speak at a women's empowerment event in New York. It was small, but it was a beginning. I stood there on stage, looking at the crowd, and said, I was once the quiet woman who let others define her worth, but now I write my own story, literally. People stood up and clapped. For the first time in years, I felt seen. When I came home that night, Daniel looked surprised. You actually did it? He said. I smiled. Oh, I'm just getting started. Because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of something big. The girl they laughed at was about to become a name they couldn't ignore. If you've ever been underestimated, remember, you don't need their approval to become unstoppable. You just need your courage. Stay with me because in part 3, everything I worked for is about to be tested. And this time, the Dawsons won't just regret their words. They'll choke on them. If this part touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. Because trust me, it's about to get powerful. 6 months later, my life was unrecognizable. My stories were being shared everywhere. I had my own blog, brand deals, interviews. People were calling me the voice of strength. But life has a strange way of testing you when you finally start to breathe again. One afternoon, I got a call from Margaret, my mother-in-law. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Clara, she said in her sharp tone, we're having a family charity gala this weekend. You should come. Daniel wants you there. I froze. A charity gala? The same type of event where they had once mocked me. Part of me wanted to say no, but another part whispered, go, walk in as the woman they said would never make it. So I agreed. Sure, Margaret, I'll be there. Daniel was shocked when I told him. You're really going? He asked. I smiled. Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world. The night of the gala arrived. Everyone looked stunning, dripping in gold and designer wear. And then there was me, in a deep red gown, confident, calm, glowing in a way money couldn't buy. When I walked in, the room actually fell silent for a moment. Margaret's eyes widened. Oh, Clara, she said, forcing a smile, you look different. I smiled back. Success changes your posture. People began whispering, not insults this time, but admiration. That's Clara Dawson, the writer? She's the one whose stories went viral. Even Daniel's father approached me. Didn't expect you to come back shining like this, he said. I smiled softly. That's what happens when you stop dimming your own light. Throughout the night, reporters kept asking for photos and interviews. Daniel stood beside me, quiet, maybe even proud, but mostly stunned. Later that evening, Margaret tried to joke again. So, Clara, I heard you're making quite the name for yourself. I suppose writing about your sad little life paid off? I looked straight at her and said, no, Margaret, writing about pain only works when you've survived it, and I did. She blinked, speechless. And in that moment, for the first time ever, I wasn't the quiet girl they mocked. I was the woman who made silence her weapon. As I left that night, people congratulated me. They said, you're inspiring, Clara. You're proof that grace wins. When I got home, I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled, not out of pride, but peace. Because I realized I didn't need revenge. I just needed to rise. The old Clara wanted them to apologize. The new Clara didn't need it anymore. But destiny wasn't done yet, because the next call I got changed everything again. It was from a TV network. They wanted to adapt one of my stories into a movie. I dropped my phone, tears rolling down my face. I whispered, Mom, I made it. Stay with me, because in part 4, everything I dreamed of starts coming true, and that's when life decides to test me the hardest. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because trust me, the next part will make your heart race. The morning after that call, I couldn't stop smiling. A movie, my story, on a screen. It felt unreal. I told Daniel over breakfast. He didn't even look up from his coffee. Another one of your writing things? It's not just a writing thing, Daniel, I said softly. They want to make a film out of my story. He laughed dryly. A film? Don't get your hopes up too high, Clara. These things never actually happen. I looked at him, calm and steady. Maybe not for you, but I'm not living small anymore. He rolled his eyes and left for work, and in that silence, I realized something painful. The more I succeeded, the more distant he became. Weeks later, the project was announced publicly. My inbox exploded. Interviews, opportunities, messages from people around the world, all telling me how my words gave them hope. But Daniel, he barely spoke to me. And when he did, his words carried venom. You think you're some kind of celebrity now. I said quietly, No, Daniel, I just finally became someone I'm proud of. He stared at me, cold. You've changed. I smiled sadly. That was the point. A few nights later, I attended the first production meeting. It was surreal. Lights, cameras, creative teams, all discussing my work. And right there, I realized this was the life I was meant for all along. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. It read, Clara, congratulations. We're proud of you. Let's have dinner soon. I smiled bitterly. Proud now? The same people who called me the wrong choice were suddenly acting like family again. But I accepted the dinner invitation anyway. Not out of love, out of closure. The night of the dinner, I arrived dressed simply but strong, calm confidence in every step. Margaret greeted me at the door with an exaggerated smile. Oh, Clara, look at you, a movie star in the family. I laughed softly. No, Margaret, I'm just the same woman you once said didn't belong. The table went silent. Even Daniel's father cleared his throat and said, You've come a long way, Clara. We may have misjudged you. I looked at him, tears forming, but my voice steady. You didn't misjudge me. You just never tried to see me. Margaret looked uncomfortable. Daniel just stared at his plate. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was free. When I left that house, the night air felt lighter, and as I drove away, I whispered to myself, this was never about revenge. It was about self-respect. But I didn't know that life was about to give me one last twist, a test to see if I truly forgave them or just moved on. Because 2 weeks later, Daniel came home late, eyes red, voice shaking. Clara, he said, I lost everything. The company, the money, it's all gone. I froze. The man who once laughed at my small paycheck was now begging for help. And in that moment, my heart whispered, this is your final choice, Clara. Will you walk away or rise higher by showing grace? Stay with me, because in part 5, I'll tell you how I faced that choice and how it changed everything. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe, because the ending will stay in your heart forever. When Daniel told me he'd lost everything, I just stood there, silent, still. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him before. His voice cracked. Clara, I don't know what to do. I made bad investments. I thought I was helping the family, but now we're drowning. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, quietly, Daniel, do you remember when your family laughed at me for not having money? He lowered his eyes. Yes, "Do you remember when I cried in that bathroom while you said nothing?" His lips trembled. "I remember." "Good," I said softly, "because that pain taught me how to stand on my own feet." He looked up, desperate. "Clara, please, I need you." I took a breath. "Do you need me, or do you need my success?" He didn't answer. And that silence told me everything. The next day, Margaret called. Her tone was different, nervous, fragile. "Clara, dear, Daniel told us what happened. We don't know what to do. Can you help?" I smiled faintly. "I will. Because no matter what they'd done, I refused to become them. I transferred enough money to stabilize their situation, just enough to give them a chance, not a luxury. When Margaret tried to thank me, I said, 'You don't owe me thanks. Just remember this: kindness isn't weakness. It's power used with grace.'" Weeks passed. Daniel moved out quietly one morning. No fight, no drama, just an empty closet and a note that said, "I'm sorry." I cried, not because I wanted him back, but because I finally let go of everything that had ever hurt me. A few months later, my film premiered. It was called The Wrong Choice. And when the credits rolled, people stood up, clapping, cheering, crying. After the screening, a young woman came up to me and said, "Clara, your story saved me. I was in a toxic marriage too, but after hearing your words, I left. I found myself again." I hugged her and whispered, "That's all I ever wanted, for my pain to mean something." Later that night, I stepped outside into the cool air. The city lights shimmered like stars. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was free. I looked up at the sky and said softly, "Thank you, God. They shamed me publicly, but you raised me privately. And now everyone sees what you saw all along." And in that moment, I realized forgiveness wasn't about letting them go. It was about freeing myself. Because true success isn't money, fame, or revenge. It's peace. And I finally had mine. So, if you're listening to this and someone has ever made you feel small, remember my story. You don't have to fight back with hate. Just rise. Quietly, powerfully, completely. Because one day, the same people who laughed at you will clap for you. And that applause will echo louder than their laughter ever did. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this. Because you never know, the next story might be yours.